Hello, Zoo Crew. I know it's been forever. Again, still doing my like 70-hour work weeks, but come December, mid-December, everything should start slowing down for about a month. So I should actually be able to start getting some more zoo videos out there, and just videos in general. Um, but I thought I would at least, because I know people have been on my channel as well as on the forums asking about my advice for upcoming upcoming larger events and whatnot. Modern's getting big. It's also gotten uh, pretty much tacked on to SGG instead of Legacy. I don't want to start that conversation, but it's there, which I think is good as a Modern guy. I'm happy with that decision. Feel bad for Legacy, but I'm happy about that decision. But I thought I would make a quick video entailing sort of a guide as to what I'm doing right now. This should last until some kind of crazy big spoiler happens again, and how I got to where my zoo is at this position, and how I sideboard against it, or for it, as well, because I know that sideboarding is an issue that some people have with Modern. Modern sideboards count a lot. In this deck that uses Collected Company, it counts for even a lot more. So let me just start at the very beginning. I have a very, very detailed post in MTG Salvation's Modern zoo thread. If you go to the zoo thread, it would be post 5494 if you want to read the whole thing. Basically talks about everything I'm about to talk about right now. But every once in a while I like to just take out every single card in my zoo deck, literally make it into a blank slate and rebuild it from scratch, knowing that I want a new fresh perspective on zoo. You'd be surprised how much basically just rebuilding it from scratch, you improve the deck. You get rid of notions that have become biased over time, like, for example, oh, Elspeth is the greatest card ever because I used her that one time and it worked awesomely. You might actually look back at it then and be like, well, Elspeth actually doesn't fit in this meta right now, so I shouldn't actually include it in my deck whatsoever. By adding your most important cards first, then the cards that you want to play, and so on. So, of course, building it, I've built a very basic zoo core. I don't even look at mana until the end, but I had, 4 Path to Exile, 4 Lightning Bolt, 4 Wild Nacatl, 4 Tarmogoyf, and 4 Neither Valkyrie, and that's basically where I stood. Even before that, though, I had to, let me clarify, decide which side of the fence of zoo I wanted to go on. Do I want to go on the bigger zoo side, or do I want to go on the smaller zoo side? Smaller zoo, by the way, has been putting up results. I don't want to pretend like it hasn't. It actually has been putting up results. It's been doing pretty good. The small zoo, just to show you, has been like this kind of zoo, where it's very, very, very one-droppy, and then it's basically your Burning Tree Emissary. It's a Gruul zoo that has been around forever, and the idea is you can pull the Eidolon, the Great Revel, out of the sideboard. It is a good zoo. It's fast. It's blisteringly fast, really, and it can do some good work. However, and that being said, it's also better than the mid-range zoo or the just big zoo. I wouldn't necessarily call it mid-range. It's still very aggressive. Is that it can, one advantage over it is that it can still beat combo decks just by simply being faster. At any point in time, if the opponent fumbles or stumbles, you'll win because you're just consistently fast. But there is still a hard turn 4 cap limit, really, where you start losing the game because you're top decking, and it starts becoming harder if the opponent just stabilized and is putting down bigger threats than you. So that being said, I had to choose between that or the big zoo. I know I'm calling it big zoo. It's not really huge, but I guess it does run 5 mana dorks, so we'll go with big zoo. And I decided to go with the Collected Company for a couple reasons. One, Collected Company reminds me of Green Sun Zenith, which I undervalued it when it was first spoiled, but it's very good because it allows me to then build my sideboard around it, and that'll let me win games with that. Literally by the nature of having Collected Company if my sideboard runs a lot of creatures anyways that can deal with the threats, I'm adding extra amounts into my deck. Therefore, I am upping my chance of winning against a deck that I was unfavored for just by virtue of having Collected Company. So my game 2s and game 3s will always be better because of Collected Company, and that's something that I actually really wanted in the modern format. Not only that, but with Collected Company being by virtue of what it is, it also, I think, lends itself to being better played in the hands of guys who know the deck. It sounds weird, but to basically, let me just say it this way, like Jund is a 50-50 deck. It's pretty obvious that anyone who's played the format knows that Jund doesn't really have any good matchups, doesn't really have any bad matchups. Yes, there's a few, but I'm overall blanket statement, Jund is about a 50-50 deck. What that means, though, is that skilled players can then take the deck and make it more than a 50-50 deck. They can eke maybe 3 or 4 win percent out of it, and then if it's pretty much a 55% win rate against everything in the format, it is the best deck to choose. I'm thinking something sort of the same lines with this. Small Zoo, I think, is a better deck to play if you don't really know Zoo and the metagame all that much, and it's okay to. It takes years to learn ins and outs of certain things, so it's okay to run that. And in fact, it might actually be a better choice to run a smaller Zoo because you have Tron or something that you need to be fast for, and then this deck is actually not that great against because it's slower. So that being said, I'm not saying that Small Zoo is a bad deck choice. What I'm saying is, in my hands, I feel like it's a better deck choice for me because I can eke out extra win percentage because there's a lot of outs in this, and I know the deck and I know the modern format, so I can actually just like choose certain outs and wait for them and know that I made the right decision. If I'm making the right decision, I think this deck is a better deck overall than the smaller Zoo deck, simply because you have more outs and you have more ways to beat your opponent. Moving on, I decided I wanted to do that. So I knew that I was going to use the 4 Noble Hierarch and that I was going to use at least 2 to 3 Collected Company. But then I had to decide some other things that I wanted, and I knew another thing that I wanted was I actually wanted a little less Pride Mage because my use of Pride Mage has gone down over time. It was great like a little bit ago, but it's still great. It's just less good. But what has become a lot better is Voice of Resurgence, and not even for blue deck reasons, but because of Jund and Junk have started to come back up. And also there seems to be more removal running around Modern now than there used to be. So Voice becomes a lot better in that respect. Voice punishes my opponents for playing instant speed, and it also punishes my opponents for playing removal, which is things that I wanted. So I added 2 voices in there. I actually only owned 1 voice, and then I bought a second one just recently. It's been so good, I've been even thinking about taking out 1 Tarmogoyf to fit in maybe an extra Collected Company, but keep my voices. But I kind of like the 27 creature count here, so I'm leaving it as is. If I was going to take out a Goyf, I'd probably either replace it with another Retreat or something along those lines. Retreat or Collected Company. But right now I was actually pretty firmly in Naya. I didn't even want to go into blue, just because I didn't want the chance of burn to, rip me a new one. So this is where I stood for a little while. I said I wanted Voice, so I added some things in here, and I actually had a 4th Path to Exile and a 3rd Collected Company and no retreats, and then these Geists were all Luxodon Spiders. Over time, I realized that Luxodon Smiter, while he's good, there's a lot less counterspells being flung around and more removal, so Geist becomes better during that. So I decided, alright, maybe I want to think about Geist. And at that point, Retreat to Coralhelm exists now, so I decided to use Retreat to Coralhelm. Over time, I've decided to drop from 2 Retreat to Coralhelm from 3 to Retreat to Coralhelm to 2 Retreat to Coralhelm, just because I've been a little less reliant on it, and sometimes it shows up in multiples and I don't want it to, so 2 seems fine. Into, I reliably get it during the late game and generally don't get it during the beginning game, which seems to be the better way to use the Retreat to Coralhelm in this form of Zoo deck. That might change. I don't know for sure. I haven't nearly tested enough to tell you that 3 or 2 is the correct amount. Just so far, this has been solid. I've played this deck, I think, around 15 games of 3, and I've lost only 2. Granted, there's some of the weird decks throwing in there, but I've played against some serious decks too. So it's actually been incredibly solid for me, just by virtue of having things like Voice of Resurgence. The deck is better on its own, and I don't need to rely on Collected Company or Retreat to Coral Helm. I do think the one Collected Company is probably okay in the sideboard. But if I was going to go, no blue, I would just do what I was doing before. I'd put more Luxodon Smiter in, take out the Geist, I'd take out the 2 retreats and add a Path to Exile, another Collected Company, and I'd call it a day. But something that I really like is the sideboard, and that's what blue has really been giving me access to, is the sideboard. This sideboard feels solid. Like, I don't think I've got very many bad uses of this sideboard. In fact, I've got some great uses of this sideboard. And this sideboard, I took a while to come to it. So what I did for anyone who wants to know how I sideboard in general, I know this video is going long, is I take a piece of paper out. I know, good old analog writing, and I take a piece of paper out and I make 2 columns. Depending on what I'm writing for, I either write for a local meta or I write for an online meta. Recently, it's been an online meta, but I will also explain how I do it for local meta. I make 2 columns. I fold the paper in half and I make 2 columns. On the left side, I use tier 1 decks, and on the right side, I do tier 2 decks. The tier 1 decks in my local meta would be people's primarily played decks, and then the tier 2 would be whatever they sometimes bring. Like, some guys are really big in Infect, and then occasionally bring in like a Tron deck or something. So that's what I would do to divide it, and that way I can kind of know that column 1 gets a little bit more importance than column 2 because of play prevalence. Then I list out everything that's in that tier 1 or tier 2, and the data I use, KT Ken, he's the moderator at Modern with me, and he does like individual statistics that you can always find in his signature right here. You click on it, you can go to his website, Modern Nexus, which is a great website, and it will give you the breakdown of basically what's tier 1 deck, what's tier 2 now, and actually we'll talk about how it does that too. You can even further look at his raw data for paper or major games or MTGO. I'm not that, I don't need to go in that deep. I just want to look at what's tier 1, what's tier 2, occasionally look at their overall metagame percentage. And this is shifted. It's a little bit older. He updates it, I think, every month. So we're a little bit into the 2nd month. So it will eventually need to be updated. And I've seen some shifts on my own. Things like Affinity's gone down, Jund has gone up, Grixis Twin has gone, I think, up a bit. So I look at this and I write these down. So you can see all these things are written down over here. And then from there, I decide what do I want? What are the big things that I absolutely can't live without? And I decide things like Thalia, I decided were really important to me, as was to negate. At this point, since I'm in blue, I even said it like I need one at least, Stony Silence. Eventually I decided, I need some stuff against, some outs against burn decks, or sorry, the aggro decks, so I bring in, like I said, Grim Lavamancer. I decided Spellskite somewhere around there was important, and I can firmly believe that Spellskite is super good right now, especially if you're running Collected Company, and in blue, it's great to use right now. And then from there I have to start figuring things out. So I had Core Firewalkers here instead of Rock's Warmonk for a little while. I had two Unified Wills here instead of Stubborn Denial. I had a Aven Mind Sensors in after I realized I was still pretty open against Jund, Tron, so Aven Mind Sensor comes in against both those decks. So I've really started trying to figure that stuff out. After a little while, I realized I had way too many counter spells, and that 4 was too many and 2 was too little, so I needed 3, but even 3 kind of didn't work right. And I eventually looked at my notes again and realized everything that I was sideboarding in against those decks were 2 converted mana costs. My 2 converted mana cost was really high on this, so I decided to switch it to 1 Stubborn Denial for a 1 converted mana cost, since I was taking out things like lightning bolts, and it's been working great since then. So that works. It's basically, I have 2.5 counter spells, which actually was the correct number that I needed. Over time, I realized that weirdly enough, I have a bad game 1 against Burn, but a great game 2 and a great game 3 because I was sideboarding in 11 cards against them. So I cut some cards out, and things like I didn't need Dedicated Hate, so I didn't need the core Firewalkers, so I decided to go with Rock's War Monk then, because that's just generally better against aggro decks. I could have been Kitchen Finks. I decided that Rock's War Monk hits a little harder, and I think the fact that it doesn't die to lightning bolts is actually somewhat important. And also, I only gain 2 life off of Kitchen Finks against the Red Deck Wins matchup. That's not super great. Rock's War Monk will gain me lots more. So that's how things started coming to be. I took out certain things as I realized that I was only sideboarding in against 1 matchup, and even then I had a bunch of other things that would come in. So like even things like Ancient Grudge, I did that with. And the full guide you can actually find in that poster, or that post that I put here, and it talks about everything that I need. To quickly go over it for those that, well, actually you guys can just pause it. I have high quality videos so you can watch it. Here's the first page. Cool, done pausing it. We're going to scroll down. There's the second part. And you guys can read that if you want. I'll be using it today as well. So, I like to then, after I'm done figuring out what goes in and out, then figuring out what comes out of those decks, and then transposing that onto a clean page so that I can refer to it at any point in time, especially online. It's great to do that too. I actually like to bring sideboard guides with me to events too, just to make sure I remember, even though I don't always follow them. And I have some reasonings too here. Like, it seems weird that I wouldn't take out Knight of the Reliquaries from the Infect matchup, but that's because Knight can actually feed Grim Lavamancer or find Wildwood for me. So that's her primary use during that matchup. Things like that. So that's how I build my sideboards and my main decks. The video's gone on really long. After that, I figure out my mana base. My mana base really hasn't changed for this deck whatsoever, and that's been perfectly fine for me. So that's how I find out what I'm doing in my main deck and my sideboard, and that's how I came up with this sideboard. There's one difference. I don't own a Sigarda online, and I don't really have like a ton of funds to pay for it right now, so I don't necessarily want to buy it. However, if I'm gonna do if I decided to start doing like dailies like I would next month, I probably will end up getting it. For now, Collected Company works in that slot because it's sort of good against Jund like Sigarda is. But I do highly recommend 1 Sigarda in the sideboard because it's stupidly good against Jund. It just wins the game. So without any further ado, I think I want to start getting into leagues. I can't say that I'm going to do all my league matches right now, but I was told by my buddy online, Pizzap, that leagues are actually really good, and they're really good for people who don't have a ton of time and just generally get maybe like an hour a day to do something. So I think I'm going to try out some league stuff. Thanks for watching, guys. Remember to always feed your animals. I hope you enjoyed this update to Zoo. Again, if you ever want to be updated on Zoo, you can always check out the Zoo thread. Subscribe to my videos if you want to see more about Zoo and just occasionally random stuff like Belcher, Red Deck Wins, or Shamanism. Sometimes I do other stuff. And yeah, thanks for watching, guys.